Welcome back to the Boys in Motion podcast. I'm Brian here with Andrew and Tyler, and today we've got a really fun episode because we're sitting down with Toronto running phenom, Janson Bautista, a guy who somehow runs really fast while also giving off the vibe that he's just trying to not fall off all the time. So this is somebody who has ran a 340 marathon last fall, and then not even a year later, this spring, dropped a sub 320. And I think he had a lot more in the tank in that Toronto Marathon because the very next weekend he followed it up with his first sub 40 10K, cracking that even before me. Now he's doing this with like very much not pro training blocks. He kind of acts like running isn't life or death, like many of us do. So we want to just unpack about, how he thinks about his training, his racing, his improvement, and how much he just enjoys the sport.
Yeah, I think this episode is going to be a fun one. And I think a lot of people can learn from athletes like Janson who don't overcomplicate things. So whether you're training for your first 5K or trying to break a marathon PB, I think this episode will help a lot of people think about running in a healthier and maybe more sustainable way to keep stacking those PBs.
True. And honestly, we all know someone like that in this world, in our community. The person who casually just shows up and throws down a crazy time or a new PB every time they run a distance, and it's no big deal. I feel like that is Janson in a nutshell.
One, two, three, four.
Perfect. Well, Janson, welcome to the pod. We initially had this scheduled into our calendar because you were giving me a FaceTime right as we were starting up a podcast last week. And we just all felt like we couldn't not have that conversation and share it with the world. So, welcome.
So, yeah, first and foremost, thanks for having me. Quick correction here. I wish I did a 340 the last marathon in October. It was a 355.
Okay. That makes it even more impressive
I
going
wish
from
I
the
wish I did 340.
355 to the sub 320.
Yeah, I wish I
Yeah.
did a 340, but it was a 355. So happy nonetheless with the results, of course, going from October to May. And it was obviously a surprise for myself, as it probably was for all of you guys as well. And then, of course, the week after was, I'd say, an even bigger surprise.
Yeah, definitely shocking, and we will get into that. But before we dig in, like you and I, we used to work out and lift weights in university, but we never really ran. And I remember doing one track workout with you where we ran around the Brock track with Sean and nearly killed him. And
Yeah.
you were also close to death. Now you've come full circle where you're running circles around me. So talk to us about how you first got into running, what inspired you, and what's keeping you going today.
That was probably like, what, 14 years ago? 12 years ago, sorry. When we were doing those tracks at Brock
Yeah,
University, wherever that gym was called. Yeah, honestly, I remember those near-death experiences, just trying to do 400 meters without dying, and then probably thinking 1 kilometer was at 10K at the point. So I'd say like the biggest thing that got me into running, that was the question, right? Just what really kind of transpired into me getting on this journey was one of my friends when I used to work at Slack, actually. So this was October of 2022. She ran the half marathon and I just saw it on Instagram and I was like, honestly, just like send me the link on Monday. Like I replied to her story, or it might have been on Slack on the Monday. And I was like, send me the link for next May, which would have been May 2023 for the Toronto half. And I'll sign up right now and then figure it out later. So that's kind of how I got into it. It's just more so one of those, let's call it FOMO in a sense, where I saw what other people were doing. It looked cool. It looked interesting. I had no real baseline of running before that, other than maybe, I don't even want to call our little Brock thing running because that wasn't running.
it was barely anything. Yeah.
Barely anything. That was more like a walk and a half. And I would say there was 1 month during COVID where I did pick up running. So this probably would have been like April of 2020, just because we really had nothing else to do. And I hit my goal, which was a sub 25 5K, which was, I think I hit like 24:55. And the moment I hit that, I was like, I'm done. Like, this is not for me. Hit that
You were
goal.
ready to retire
I'll
just at
never
that
forget it.
moment.
Yeah, it was probably like middle of April, right a month into COVID, and I was like, I'm done. Like, that was so hard. And then here we are, I guess 2 years after that, ended up signing up for the May 2023 half in October of 2022. Started my training journey, I would say, probably in January of 2023, not really knowing what was going on, just hopping on 5Ks on the treadmill. And then I vividly remember dying during that 2023 half. And that was a very difficult run for sure.
For that first half?
But it was 154.
Okay. So still pretty quick. Like if you're doing that sub 2 for your first one, there's good fitness there.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Still
I was
a sub
happy.
2 is nice.
Yeah, I was definitely happy, but I remember kilometer 16 rolling around, and I was like, I think I might actually end up walking through this. So
First go at the half. What did kind of a typical week of your training block look like at that time?
it's a great question. Probably if I were to think back on that was like a little over 3.5 years ago almost. It was probably primarily 5Ks, which is probably where I do a lot of my training today too. I'm just trying to get some kilometers in, as you might have seen on my Strava. But I would say no more than a real 10K at the most is where I was peaking off. But I do remember my longest run being when I was in Hawaii, which was like middle of April of 2023. I remember doing a 16-kilometer run there, and that was the longest I did before that. And that was honestly super, super hard. It could have been just a combination of hot weather, being in Hawaii, of course, and then not really running that distance before. And it's kind of just like the unknown territory once you hit a certain threshold. But I would say training wasn't consistent. I was actually taking a look at like my year-over-year numbers from 2023 to 2024 to 5, and then now it's 2026. And I don't think I even had over 400 kilometers in 2023 in total for the whole year. So it could have just been a combination of just falling off, for the lack of a better term, in 2023, post half marathon in May, but there wasn't much tracked at least. So,
Yeah. Well, it just proves that, the best way to get somebody into running is to just sign up for the thing
yeah.
and then figure it out. Like you can scramble your way through the first half marathon if you really need to without much guidance, information, and you could just, sign up for that race and just start to train. Like, of course, you can do it intelligently if you use the tools, the knowledge, the people in your network, but like realistically, you muscled your way through without a clue in the world.
Yeah, and of course, I'm not going to say obviously I didn't run because I definitely did have a consistent training block. I just don't know if it's in line with a typical 12-week plan for whatever a half marathon training block is. But of course, as you mentioned, like I don't even know if AI was a thing back then, but like nowadays I'm just talking to chat or Claude or whoever it is and just telling it exactly what it needs to do. Now it's drafting you that plan. But back then it was primarily probably just Googling it, finding some random website, finding a 12-week plan, maybe sticking to it. But for the most part, if you missed today, for me back then at least, it wasn't necessarily a consequence. But I feel like things have developed now where there's a lot more structure and it's a lot more accessible, rather, I would say.
For sure. I think the proof is in the pudding, given that you finally did your first interval session, like after your second full, and like finally now, chat has gotten you to do a proper workout.
Yeah, so that was interesting. Honestly, pretty difficult, but I could see the benefit of it for sure. And honestly, we'll see where it kind of takes me.
It's life-changing. I mean, getting your first intervals in after you get crazy times both at the marathon and the 10K is just bonkers, and like I can't wait to see what's next.
Now I'm just setting like expectations for myself I don't know if I can hit. So let's not put some added pressure there because I don't think I need that. However, I think there's room for improvement. Yeah, so.
Where do you see the room? Like, we'll, of course, talk about your accomplishments, but talking about room for improvement, where do you see that today?
That's a great question. I mean, we had a conversation, you and I, Brian. I don't remember when exactly this was. This was actually in the summer. It was that day. I think you guys might have come over to my place, actually. And that's when we went golfing and then went back to mine after. But I remember you specifically said, I don't see any long runs from you. And you didn't mean that in like a way where it was just like you were calling me out or anything, but I was like, dude, you're right.
Oh, I meant it in a way I was calling you out.
Yeah, exactly. But I remember the day after, I went on a really long run. It was split out across, like, it was maybe like a 7K to my friend's house, did a half marathon. Maybe it was a 28K, I don't remember. And then like it was 7K to my friend's house who lives Midtown-ish. And then it was a half marathon I did with him, and then another 7K back down to Liberty. So that ended up being like a long run, but it was split. But I remember doing that the day after just because you said it. I was like, I'm gonna do it. But I would say, generally speaking, if I'm to think about my next race, which is in October, when I plan on training for that, I think I do a good job of consistency and getting kilometers in, but I am missing that aspect of consistently doing like a 30 to 35K run. Like to me, a half marathon on a Sunday is a great way to do a long run. But in reality, how much is that really helping? I don't really know. Like it probably is to a certain extent, but I think it drastically changes once you start incorporating more of like your 28s, your 32s, and then maybe your 35. I don't think we go past 35 for, a training block for a marathon, but being consistent with runs that are longer than, let's call it a 21K on a Sunday, I think is where I could improve. And then, of course, if we're thinking more like shorter distance running, interval training can definitely help. I'd imagine, just based off what I'm hearing. Don't have the proof to back it up, but I mean, I think it's no surprise why a lot of elite athletes do it.
Now I'm curious. You said you use Chat Claude AI for your training block. Are you feeding some sort of base training plan into it, or is Chat fully coming up with these workouts for you? Tell me a little bit more about the kind of training structure now, because it kind of sounds to me like there might not be too much structure, other than not falling off.
Yeah, not much structure. I mean, I definitely talk to Chat's primarily what I'll use for like personal, and then I'll use Claude for work. So it's primarily Chat, but I will tell it how I do on my races. And then I'll give you an example. Like I told him what I did on the marathon. I told him what I did for the 10K. And I did intervals for the first time on Saturday. And I said, give me a 7K interval training block based on like my times. So it kind of just spit something out there. I don't even know if that's like correct in the way. I'm using the free version of Chat. I know my friend signed up for her first half in January. Absolutely crushed it. Ended up doing a 140 in May, which was awesome. But I remember looking at her training plan and Chat was telling her to run like 16K a month in, like 14 weeks out or whatever it was. So I don't know how really accurate Chat can be at times, just with like some of the things that it's spitting out. Because in my opinion, like running 16K, 14 or 12 weeks out, whatever it is, seems pretty insane. But the way that I look at it is just more so like feeding it whatever times I've already accomplished, telling it what I want to do, and then just going off it. But I'm also taking it with a grain of salt because I do understand that it's not perfect in a sense, but I think it gives me an idea of like what I should at least be focusing on from a structure perspective. But the timing I think can be off.
Yeah, and I think with Chat, like giving it as much context as you can will help. Like you've done some pretty big mileage, like you've done months where you are doing 10K a day basically. And like that builds a lot of resiliency in your legs that like maybe Chat doesn't understand that you have that mileage below your feet. And so giving that extra context, you might see that your training blocks then start to have those much longer long runs because it knows that you have that base mileage below your feet. Because I know for myself, you're saying like it's ridiculous for to have a 16K so far out from a half, but like all of my long runs for my half, or most of them, were over 21K because it's really just building that long run engine for the half marathons. And then, yeah, like, of course, that speed work too is super essential.
Funny you mentioned that. Chat basically told me for the 10K at least, I was basically just doing it off brute force. Because I don't do short runs, or I don't do short runs for speed, or I don't really typically do that. But it was basically just saying I was pretty much relying on like my aerobic ability based on like the marathon and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, that's honestly a fair point.
Yeah, so I guess I'm curious, from your 355 in the fall into your new PR the next spring, what has changed?
Yeah, I'd say going into last October, I feel like I don't even want to call it an aspirational goal. I think it was a goal that a lot of people had going into October, which was 330. So essentially anything 329, 59, I honestly would have loved. Unfortunately, I think that a lot of us missed, and I'm not talking about like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minute miss. I'm talking about like a 20 to even like an hour miss for some people, unfortunately. So I know it was a big one, but I would say the biggest thing there was learning from what I did wrong. And if I think about what I did in October, I would say the biggest things that I really took away from that was my body gave out really quick. And when I mean quick, I mean like kilometer 27. But there's a big way to really think about an additional 15 kilometers when your body's literally giving up and cramping, and like 15 kilometers already is a long run. So having to do that on top of a run that you just did for 27 kilometers where your body's already telling you that you don't want to go longer, I feel like it was just more so a wake-up call for me that I had to get more, at the very least, mileage on my legs. So it's something that I've changed this year in terms of just getting my legs used to, let's call it constant pressure, for the better, for the worse. But I would say the biggest thing that I really think I did differently this year for not only actually primarily for the marathon, was like I actually had a plan this time and I stuck to it. So going into last October, again, I was going for 3:30 and finishing 3:55, which is a pretty big miss, like 25 minutes. Obviously, I was super happy with it being my first full marathon. So obviously, nonetheless, still proud of myself for that. But I was kind of going into it with the mindset of, well, I can run a 1:38, whatever half marathon. I can just double that, add an extra 10, 15 minutes, like I should be okay. But going into it was a whole different ballgame. So I think this time around, I actually had the experience of knowing when the wall would kick in, what the wall even was. And I think the biggest thing for this marathon was, again, just having more structure. So going into this one, I essentially brought a good amount of gels. I think I had 8 gels is what I think I brought in. I think I had 1 gel before, about 10 minutes before starting. And then I think I had 1 gel every 5.5 kilometers. So I really stuck to it to a T. And I would also say the second difference that I noticed this marathon versus the last marathon was the first half of the race. I went guns blazing for the half marathon, or for the full marathon in October, because I felt good. This time around, despite it being, let's call it like, a little bit of an easier course with a downhill going down Young Straight, which was awesome, I was very conservative with the way that I was approaching it. So my first 5 kilometers, I think I finished the first 5 kilometers at like a 24:50, which is like a 4:58 pace. So nothing fast by all means, but I was going down Young Straight and I was telling myself, like, dude, like, slow down, because I didn't want to face that same burnout. I didn't want my legs to give out as I did in the last marathon. And I think that really helped me, because my splits, even for this marathon, were significantly better. And it was the complete opposite of a race than the last one, where the last one, I think I went probably like, sub 140 maybe in the first half of the October marathon, versus this one, I went out a lot more conservative. I think I was at like a 142 to 143. And then the back half of this marathon, I ended up with a negative split of like 6 minutes or so, 6 or 7 minutes, versus October, I was probably like a 140, and then I was probably at like a 215 for the two half marathons within that marathon. So long story short, a little bit of a long-winded answer there, but I would say, one, understanding the wall is real and you can't just run through it, because it's easier said than done. Like, your body and your legs are telling you to stop, and it's a lot harder to just get past that. But I would say the second part as well is having a structure and having a plan and sticking to it, and not letting my feels get in the way of, just because I feel good 5, 10, 15 kilometers in, and not just like trying to gun it right off the bat, was the biggest difference from this marathon versus the last one. And then, of course, having done it before, I knew what to expect, which was awesome as well.
Yeah, no, that's nice. I guess one follow-up question there. What do you like better, call it summer prep going into a fall marathon, or a winter prep going into a spring marathon? Just curious.
Great question. I always thought I could never run in the winter. And here I am running 106 laps around a fucking building with Andrew on January 31st. So that was an interesting experience in minus 20 degrees. Obviously, shout out to Andrew for 100 miles. That was obviously awesome. I would say primarily before, I would probably be like a treadmill runner in the winter is primarily what I would do. It'd primarily 5Ks on the treadmill, because anything above 5K is awful, and anything 5K and below on a treadmill is still awful. But I would say I've learned to appreciate running outside more in the cold than the summer. It also doesn't help that today felt like 35 degrees, and I just literally finished a run not too long ago, and I was actually dying. So to answer your question, I would say last year, 2 years ago, I probably would have said summer running, like, who doesn't love good weather, is what I preferred. But I think I actually prefer a little bit more of a breeze. And by breeze, I mean a -10 is not the worst thing out there.
The boy is maturing. The boy is maturing. That is a sign of growth, I would say. And I want to touch on like the sticking to a plan.
Yeah.
The 320 that you were able to run, or actually sub 320 you were able to run, do you think the real benefit was sticking to the plan before race day or sticking to the plan on race day? What gave you more benefit?
What do you mean by before race day? Are you talking about like prep?
Like sticking to a structured training plan versus having a game day plan that you actually stick to. What did you find more beneficial?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that question. I don't know if I had a real structure going into it other than run 60 kilometers a week. So that's primarily what I was doing this year. I think I've only missed it. I think I had 50 kilometers like 1 week in January, and then my other one that I missed was the week after the marathon. But for the most part, I was 60 and above, and that was my main goal for the year, or pretty much for my training block. I would say you can't get to 60 kilometers without at least doing one long run. So I think from that sense, I did have structure. But I would say execution of actual event day probably helped from a fueling perspective, because that's not even a territory I've ever been in before in terms of being able to have that much fueling in terms of carbs and gels every certain amount of kilometers. I think that helped so much. But I also think it's all mental as well, right? Like if I know I'm doing something every 5.5 kilometers and I stick to it, I'm just waiting for the next block and I'm going to take it, and eventually it just feels like a routine. So I think it's just more of like kind of like a well-oiled machine at the same time. But to answer your question, the prep of going 60 kilometers a week, which I understand is probably not the best way to think about it, it's just what worked for me and it might not work for everyone, definitely helped from a consistency and discipline perspective because I didn't miss a week. And then of course sticking to a plan and not letting, let's call it, my ego get ahead of me just because I'm feeling good after 5-10 kilometers if I want to run a 22-minute 5K to start, also helped save my legs. And again, it led to negative splits, which I think helped so much, where I probably could have ran more than the marathon if I needed to. If I needed to.
But that's impressive. And like just sticking to like 60K a week and just going out and running the miles clearly is hugely beneficial. And I think maybe, people overcomplicate things, especially if you're not, running for blistering fast times like Andrew. I think like even I could learn something like that. Like you're running more big weeks than most people because you're not in a block, you're just running. And you end up running so many more kilometers than most people who end up doing these complicated blocks with these huge workouts and all of the strategy behind race day or like before race day, but you're just running. The proof is in the pudding. It works.
Just running.
Andrew, how much bread do you think is still on the table for Janson once he starts incorporating in those speed sessions, those like proper long runs? And second question, your take on his fueling, being a high carb guy. There's got to be more than 8 gels on a marathon day, I think.
Well, I guess first question is, I'm curious, you said every 5.5 kilometers. What is that gel that you're taking every 5.5?
It's just a goo caramel, caffeinated. Didn't even know it was caffeinated until the day of.
So all calf, but maybe 25 milligrams?
20, I think.
20, okay. Oh, yeah, so that's nothing. That's basically non-calf.
Okay,
so that's
perfect.
Yeah, so 200
and basically no carbs.
That's 200 grams of carbs. So I definitely think there's some room there as if next block, you're wanting to play with some higher carb. But I think there's definitely a lot of room with more structure in that training plan and kind of having distinct, you just discovered intervals. I think you should, mess around with intervals a little bit more and maybe some more threshold and marathon pace work. Because, man, what I would do to, cut 35 minutes off of times. So if you're able to do that jump in one season, there's definitely still a lot of room to improve there. The one question I have is I'm curious, as much as I'm sure it sucked in the moment, and coming back on Lakeshore and on front and up bay was probably one of the most grueling things you've ever done. How valuable for like your future progression do you think experiencing that bonk was? Of like learning those things firsthand and not just hearing people tell you things?
Yeah, it was Sorry, do you remember repeating the question? I think I just like went down memory lane just thinking about that whole. I just thought like.
I want to know, like, basically, for yourself and for people that are maybe wanting to do their first marathon,
Yeah.
how valuable do you think actually experiencing that bonk for your future performance gains and like knowing, you know, the beast that is the marathon? How valuable was it to actually experience it and like know what led up to that moment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think that's probably like the best way to think about it in a sense where it sucked. I mean, you're obviously dedicating so much time and effort into obviously a big goal of yours. And, you know, I really wanted 3:30. And I think when you don't hit it, it's a tough reality because you're obviously putting like a lot of mileage, you're putting a lot of sweat. I don't want to say blood and tears because I didn't cry, but it's essentially like one of those moments where you're like, you essentially feel like you failed in a sense.
Shell shocked. Yeah, like you're almost shell shocked that you can't believe that it is this bad.
It's that bad, right? Exactly. And I would say, you know, nonetheless, I was happy with the result, but I think I learned a lot, and I think that's what was super important about it. And I think I took it. I don't want to say I took it lightly, but I feel like going into it, it was one of those moments where it's like, oh, I've run a half. I've PR'd that course. I run another half. I PR'd that course. You know, I run a 10K. You PR that course, and then you don't really know what it's like to not hit a goal until you don't hit a goal. And, you know, fortunately enough, like I will say, thankfully, or more or less, maybe it's a good thing or a bad thing. Like I work in sales, so there have been months where, you know, you don't hit your quota. And I think, you know, you just have to bounce back and you kind of just don't let it get to you. I think it's one of those things where if you just give up, then you're kind of just back at square one. Or you could use this fuel and kind of take your learnings and then obviously see what happens the next time around. And here we are like 36 minutes faster, which I, again, never thought was even possible. Like there was never a world where I thought 320 was in reach. I didn't even think 325 was in reach. I was like 327 and a half best case. But again, just took what I kind of had from the last race, didn't let it get to me, and you know, obviously it worked out really well, so we're happy. But I would say everyone has to have a humbling experience in order to kind of get to where they need to be.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, I think you need to let it kick your ass at least once, and then you kind of know that, hey, you have to work a little harder to get what you're out there to do, right?
Yeah, and I can't wait. I'm gonna get humbled at the ends too. Like it's probably gonna be October, so like I'm probably gonna cramp up at 27, and then who knows what I'll do next May. But it's just one of those where you really don't know what it's like until you actually experience it. And I ran around the Bay last year, not this year, but like 2025. I think all of you. I don't know if Tyler you ran it, but I think Andrew and Brad you ran it. Felt really good. And again, I was using it as a baseline. I was like, oh, I hit my goal, sub 230, which is like a 4:56 pace, 30 kilometers. Like I could do 42. And then you don't. And then I get to kilometer 27, which is not even 30. And I'm like, holy shoot. Like I have 15 more of this to do. Like it's not happening. Like at that moment, I knew it wasn't happening. And you kind of just like, you don't want to throw in the towel, but you're like, this is out of reach. But the thing I would say is your goals start to dwindle where eventually you just want to like fall on the safety net of like, okay, that's the absolute baseline of where I need to be. Because I obviously had to walk at kilometer 27 last October. I was like, oh, 330 is not in reach, maybe 335. And then you're like, oh, wait, no, 340. And then you're like, wait, no, 345. And you're like, oh, wait, no, 350. And you're like, how low do I really go? Like, where is rock bottom? So you just have to push through. And
turn the watch to time of day and just...
Well, I
just
wish it died
going.
at that point. Like, I wish my watch died at that point. So it was just one of those where the lows just kept getting lower. But now it feels like the highs are just getting higher. So...
And this is what I want to touch on. So you obviously had this experience last fall where like you reach this realization that the goal isn't happening, and then you negotiate with yourself as like that time keeps creeping up.
Yeah.
This spring was the complete opposite, where there must have been a point in your race that you started to turn it up and you started to realize that like 330 is happening.
Yeah.
And you can dial it even further and dial it even further.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? When was the first time you realized like, boom, 330 is happening? And when did you really start to turn it up? And how did that feel to start to move from, achieving your A goal to pushing beyond what you thought you could do?
Yeah, great question. Honestly, it happened really early. I don't know why it happened early. Again, not the right. I don't think that's the right way to say it. But the moment where I felt like I had it in the bag was kilometer 15, which is very interesting because it was very early on.
Rosedale Valley Hill. That makes sense.
Oh, is that-
makes a lot of sense.
That's it.
Okay.
That's after like 6K of descent.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes total sense. 15K, I was like, okay, I got this. However, once I got to 15 kilometers, I was like, I didn't change my plan. When I got to kilometer 20, maybe a little uptick. When I got to kilometer 21, I was like, okay, I'm feeling good. So let me dial it up. At that point, I'd probably dialed it up to like a 440 pace, if I were to guess. 445, I don't remember. I remember kilometer 24, for some reason, don't even ask me why, my group chat was going off and we were all running the race and we were all going for PBs. And I remember just like texting group chat, like I'm at kilometer 24. I was like, we're good. We got to kilometer 30. I was like, I'm good. And then I think at kilometer 30 or 32, I remember texting group chat, if my body doesn't give out, I'm going for 320. So it was around 30 to 32 is when I felt it. But I also learned that you have to really approach the race in 3 blocks, right? It's like 10 miles, 10K, I think is the way to do it. So once I got to that 32 mark, which is your 20 miles done, that's when like the real race started. And that's when I like honestly felt really good. I remember running down Lakeshore. I was probably at kilometer 29 at this point, and I felt a little thing in my knee. And it was just like a little, like, I don't even know what it was. And I was like, please don't give up right now. Like, just please don't. But that ended up being okay. I forgot where the turn was. Andrew, do you remember where the turn was on that trail?
Yeah. It was just after the Humber Bay Bridge, after all the condos, at the end of that strip.
Like 37 or 30.
Yeah.
No, that must have been like 36, 37, something like that.
I think it was 36, yeah.
36, okay. At that moment, I also knew that things were going well. And I remember looking at my watch, and I think I hit the 3-hour mark. And I think I had 20 minutes. It was a 3-hour mark, and I think I had 4 kilometers left. So that was also another indicator where I was like, okay, if I just run a 4-minute 5K, if I just run, not 4 minutes, sorry. If I run 4 kilometers at 5K, I will hit 320. So all I have to do is just run a little bit faster than that. So I remember running through there, and I remember also getting to like 37, no, not 30, like maybe like 38, 39. And I remember also just passing people on Lakeshore. This was honestly this was like a really, really cool moment where there's just a group of guys here running, and I'm actively accelerating at this point. So these guys that I run by are looking at me, and they're like, dude, like, go get it. I'm like, oh shit, like, these guys are telling me to go get it. I don't even know who these guys are. And at that moment, I was just like going even faster. And then like I passed another block of guys, and they said the exact same thing. And I was like, oh, okay, like, I'm feeling good. I'm going for it.
That was the Hot Wheels.
That was a Hot Wheels. It was
you.
going crazy. And then we got to like past medieval times at this point, and we're on Lakeshore. But because I had the jets on, fortunately enough, I don't know where these jets came from. I remember there was probably no one in front of me and no one behind me for, I would say, at least 150 meters, give or take. But I also want to acknowledge that the marathon is more spread out, right? It's not as congested as like the half marathon where people are crossing the finish line at the same time. We're over 3 hours into the race at this point. So there was a little bit more distance between people. But I remember running down Lakeshore past medieval times. We're like probably like a kilometer away from the finish line, if that. And on both sides of Lakeshore, there's like 2 stands of people cheering, two crowds, like one on the left side, one on the right side, and you're just running down the middle. But the best part about it, there's no one in front of me and no one behind me. So that was like a top 3 or moment of my life. Honestly, probably number 1. I just don't want to be a loser and say that. But I literally ran through this crowd, and people are cheering for me. And like it was like kind of like whatever. I was like, oh, they're cheering. But then it got to the point where I was like actually feeling myself. And I got to the point where I was actually like literally doing this with my hands, and it got louder and louder. And I was like, whoa, this is sick. I was just like high-fiving random people in the crowd. It was honestly like such a surreal moment. If there was a drone footage of that, or if I had like meta glasses, that honestly would have been such a sick moment to relive. But I ended up just gunning through there. That was a sick moment, past the finish line. Kilometer 41 and 42 were my fastest of the whole race, which is crazy. So I ended up doing that at a 4:15 and a 4:07, I think, for my last 2 kilometers.
That's wild.
So
that's actually
was just
crazy.
like feeling really good about it. And then the last 300 meters was like a 3:36 or something, according to Strava at least. But it was a surreal moment. So that's, I guess, the timeline of my marathon. 15 kilometers is when I felt good. 21 is when I felt like I could pick it up. 29 was a little bit of a lingering moment, as well as a check-in with the group chat, as well as kilometer 24. And then once we turned back on past Tampa Bay Bridge, started getting that acknowledgement from those random people who told me to like keep going, picked it up even more. That extra boost from the marathon, or just running down Lakeshore, was awesome. And then just like finished strong. The last 2 kilometers, my fastest, was kind of it. And I guess the rest is history.
That's sweet. I mean, you heard it here first, folks. You got to check in with the group chat before you could put the zoomies.
Yeah,
that's great. I like that.
I don't even know like why we were all on our phone, but it wasn't for too long. But I was at a controlled pace at that point. You know, I wasn't going too fast, so I kept help myself stay grounded.
It is hilarious. Like you have your phone, but are you also AirPods in guy when you're running?
Yeah.
I feel like you still are, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever train without music? Like, have you ever run without music?
No.
Even your like all your races, your AirPod in?
Like I think so. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
That's ballistic. That is so ballistic.
On race day, I've never listened to music. That's really
What are
interesting.
you listening to?
Like that to me, race day is just like it's music in its own right. Like there's always people cheering. Like at least at the Toronto
of course.
Marathon
Yeah.
half, it's like awesome. Yeah.
It's funny.
And there's people around you, and I love to hear the breath, hear the the Nikes hitting the floor. It's just good.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I mean, I'm not disagreeing or agreeing, and you can't hate it. You can't knock it if you don't even tried it. But no, I haven't tried it.
Interesting. Okay, question. You did something diabolical following the sub 320, which was the very next weekend.
Yeah.
You ran a 10K,
Yeah.
blistering fast, first ever sub 40. One, why the hell did you set your calendar up like that? And two, how are you now faster than me? Like, you have gone absolutely ballistic this spring.
I will say, Sporting Life is a favorable course. So I do want to put that out there. Obviously, I don't want to discredit anything, but I would say that definitely gave me a boost. At the same time, you also gave me a boost. You literally told me like your 5K sub 20 wasn't real. I was like, all right, whatever, dude. Watch me. So you're like, yeah, you had a couple pauses. I was like, yeah, stoplights. But
Your fault, Brian.
I guess, yeah, you reap what you sow. I'm like, I should be like explicit here. I'm not like, I'm so proud of this runner that you've become, and it's just awesome to witness the fitness. There's absolutely no hate. I'm just so impressed.
I'm just kidding. But I would say this race was, I mean, I don't know, I can't control the calendars, right? Like they happen to be like that. I got High Rocks in 2 weeks, and then we have Riot Relay the same week. So like, we have a packed agenda for the last 32 days or so. But I would say, I'm sorry, I don't even remember your question.
Dude, this is the demon that Ottawa needs. He's worse than the Ottawa mans who have one race per month. He has one race per week all spring.
No, I'm done after that.
Yeah, that's actually crazy. Yeah, this is the Mustafa special right here. Shout out to Mustafa. He does the exact same thing, but this is compressed.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I didn't choose this life. The schedule chose me. So it was just one of those, that run was insane. I would say this was the first time I've went for like real time. For context, last Sporting Life, which was last year, I ended up running that 43:24. So shaved off almost 5 minutes, which was good. And I thought I was going to die that one too. So super happy with that race. But I would say this race was the first one where I really tried to go for, like, I had a goal. Sorry, I always do have a goal, but this is the race where you had the least amount of room for error. Like, if I tripped, I was not going to hit sub 40. I just wouldn't have never recovered from that. If my AirPod fell out of my ear, I would only have one AirPod, and I probably would have had to start running like you guys. So probably should have lost my AirPod. But it was just one of those races where from the get-go, there was no passing people. There was no catching up. It was just more so trying to actually stick with the pacer. And I remember just like looking down at the floor, just at potholes, just trying not to step in one. Because again, there was just no room for a twisted ankle for a second or two. And like I felt like I was just cruising the whole time, but like dying at the same time, which was really good. But it was the first time I felt pressure in a race from the get-go. Because the marathon, I literally started with my friend. I don't know what happened. I thought we were going to run together, and he ended up just like jogging at like a 5:30 pace to start. I was like, okay, fair enough. I guess I'll have to leave you. But this one was like, if you're not running at a 4 pace right off the bat, you're kind of screwed. Like, you're going to have to start weaving through people because you're not with the right group or things like that. But it was a very humbling experience, I would say. And then I remember just trying not to fall, trying to stick with the pacer, and then also just sticking with the pacer until kilometer 8.5, and then that's kind of like when I just wanted to like shut off a minute if possible. But it was a crazy run. Like
That's freaky.
it was a very good one. But to your point, I remember my friend, her and her boyfriend were at one of this like intersections, and I couldn't even hear them cheering because I was so locked in, and my AirPods were in. And probably should have the AirPods off. But I look up and I'm like, oh my god, okay, like you don't really like. I was so like I felt like I almost blacked out because I didn't even know what was around me. But just one of those moments where I'm glad I got it done. I knew 40 was possible, but I wasn't sure if I was going to hit it. And the only reason why I knew it was possible just because about a month ago, or like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I ended up attempting the 5K for a 20 pace, and that was really, really, really hard. But I knew that just taking advantage of race day adrenaline, taking advantage of like the course, taking advantage of like having a pacer, all those things aligning together would make it more feasible to do that times 2.
Yep, I like it. Cool. So you've hit some big goals this spring. Last question from my end on like your fitness and your racing journey. What's the next big goal for you?
I would say I almost signed up for the Ottawa half next week. I thought about it. It was a thought. It didn't go anywhere. Thank goodness I didn't. If anyone has a bib, let me know. But it was just one of those where it's like I PR'd. Imagine PRing your PBing your 5K, your 10K, your half, and your full in 1 month.
That actually is a good story. That is a very good story.
So
and sub 90 is a huge thing.
Yeah, I thought about it, but then I was like, that's not
freaky.
feasible. Like I just don't.
And I mean, the Ottawa racecourse is not favorable, so that would be even more impressive.
Okay, thank goodness. Are you running it yourself, Tyler?
I will be running that day, but I'm a spectator.
Oh, cool. Nice. Yeah, I thought about it. I would say the next. Was it a goal that I want to hit, Brian? Is that what you mentioned?
Yeah. What's the next goal?
I mean, High Rocks, I have a goal for, but like it's not like I don't count that as the same tier personally for I guess what I want to achieve. It's probably gonna be PBing the half would be nice. I don't think I could hit 126. Like I mean, Brian would love to come for your time, but I don't think I could do that. But I would say a sub 130 would be a great PB for myself and a good goal for the half. But I did sign up for the full in October, so I don't have a shot there.
Who knows? You might run that first and or second half, depending on the fitness.
If there's one thing I learned, it would be the second half is what I probably should do, not the first half.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd say like that's it.
One question I have for you, and I think it is related to these goals, because I hope you don't fall off the goals, but I've been curious. I see lots of banter in your Strava comments all about falling off, and I'd love to hear the origin story of where this came from and what exactly it means to you.
I don't know the origin story of falling off. When did I start saying that?
Because you sure say it a heck of a lot, and everyone says it in your comments.
I feel like I used to. I used to say it a lot more than I locked in, apparently. But no, I would say The origin story of falling off. Like, the only thing that I can think of that comes to mind is, I guess, maybe just one of my friends who just has like ebbs and flows where he'll be super locked in and then he just like falls off. I don't even, like, I don't really fully know the origin story. I feel like with all this slang and lingo and all that, just in, like, with social media, one friend says it and it just goes around. Like, there's so many memes. I actually don't know the origin story for falling off, other than, like, I actually just don't want to fall off.
So what does falling off mean to you? Like, what would you consider a fall off in your personal training?
Falling off, I think falling off in general, if I were to just put it from a general term, is just when you start to develop a good routine, good habits, and then for whatever reason you just drop it or it just leaves you, because it could be whatever reason, right? It could be lifestyle change, it could be you just got lazy, it could be you hit a 5K goal from sub 25 and you just stopped running after that because you don't care anymore, aka me 6 years ago. But I would say falling off is just when you have something good going and then you stop for, let's call it, a non-legitimate reason.
Nice, fair enough. Well, yeah, you have not fallen off, so I love to see it.
Literally me. Yeah.
No shade. I mean, Tyler, you just did High Rocks, and I'm pretty sure you've done like more Ironmans than anyone on this call. So I think you're
more Ironmans, more triathlons, more everything.
Yeah, I think you're doing
3 sport than everybody put together.
I think you're doing just fine.
Yeah. Okay, so we have in 2 weeks time, in 3 weeks time,
2.5?
the Riot. Yeah, 2.5.
Yeah.
The Riot Relay, which is a 140K run from Toronto to Blue Mountain. It starts at 10 p.m. on a Friday night. We're running it with 3 other runners. Yeah. Can you just tell me a little bit about what attracted you to that race and what you're really hoping to get out of that experience?
Any excuse you can find to run socially and have fun. I think it's just more like my understanding of what's going to happen here. I probably should do some research. It's more of like you run and then it just becomes a party and you celebrate after, right? And I think it's just more of like work hard, play hard, which I think is something that I like to go by. But I would say the origin story of that, not an origin story, but like the reason why we did it was I just randomly asked like 5 friends. We all used to work together at Slack. Like, we all run, like we can all run at least a 10. Most of us have already run a half. Like, do you guys just want to do this relay from Toronto to Blue Mountain? And they all just said yeah on a whim. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'm down. Like, I didn't have to like convince anyone. I didn't have to do separate phone calls like I did with all the roommates. Like, I didn't have to like talk to each person one-on-one and be like, yo, this is why we should do it. This is what's going to happen. It was just, everyone was just down. And I was like, okay, cool. And like, it's a cool concept. Like, when else am I ever going to run a marathon? Or not a marathon, sorry, Brian, we are going to end up running a marathon. But when else are we going to like get an opportunity to like just do something crazy, stupid, active, fun, and be able to celebrate that afterwards? Like, it's such a crazy concept in my opinion, where you kind of just want to take advantage of these things, because I'm never doing that on my own time. And the fact that it's organized is a really cool experience.
So how many of you are there, and like what do you think? Have you guys thought of like the split yet? What a little bit of the details of changing it up is?
Yeah,
or what?
For context, I originally had a team, and then 3 dropped out, and then like technically 4. The other one I just kind of like politely booted, because I think it just made sense to just have a full squad. So now we're running it back with the full Core V46 team. So it'll essentially be like the 42 Baxter, our Brock, House from university, which is awesome. The caveat is, when you get a group like this, not everyone is on the same level of running.
It's totally not the same fitness. Like,
yeah.
Janson and I and
Makes
Mike
it fun though.
and
That's
Mike
what makes it fun.
are all like good runners and could put down some serious mileage.
Yeah.
Truso is getting into running. He did run a half.
Yeah.
But that was like limiting. And I don't know how much training he's done. And then Sean has literally just run a 5K, and that's about his like max distance right now.
Yeah, but to answer your question, Tyler, I would say the split that I have in my head, from my understanding, Toronto to Blue Mountain is about 140 kilometers, give or take. So I'm thinking it's probably going to be me and Brian 40-40. I'm giving Mike 30, and I don't even know if Mike wants to do 30, but that's what I'm allocating to him.
That's going to be nice.
I'm allocating 20 to Trusso, which puts us at 130. And then I'm assuming Nick and Sean can split the 10.
I don't know if Nick's running at all. I think it's
Okay.
Sean for 2.5.
Okay, cool.
basically.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I
Is
guess
this Nick Bosco?
This is Nick Bosco. He's the Lamborghini driver.
Oh man, that's so nice.
He's the choo-choo
Okay.
driver.
If he hits,
This is
if
Fred.
his shoes hit the pavement, I need videos of that.
Maybe that's what we got to try to get him to do is do at because so the legs are split up. There's like 18 well-defined legs, and you can only switch runners up during those legs. And they vary between like distances of 5K up to 10K basically. So even ourselves, when we talk about like we're each going to run 40, it will actually be like maybe 2 5s and 3 10s that we end up running.
Yeah, which I think is honestly, there's a lot of difficulties and challenges on its own. Like that, obviously, distance is one, but I don't know about you, but I've never ran at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Having recently done it, I'm very excited to hear about your evening. It won't be quite as cold as when I did it, but the
That was
evening
insane.
running is very different. So I'm excited to hear about those shifts because it'll be fun.
That's okay. I got everything planned. So if I'm understanding correctly from Andrew's 100 miles, we're eating onigiris and we're eating Twizzlers.
Yep, that's
I'm in for that.
have just a bunch
That's
and
literally all you
variety. You want lots of variety in the Lamborghini.
Yeah.
And salty and sweet. Don't lean on just one. That's what I would say.
Okay.
But the nice thing is like you're never running more than an hour.
I know,
right?
that's what
and
I'm
then you
looking
get a
forward to.
huge break. You're laying down for like you're gonna run 1 hour and then chill for like 3. Quite honestly, so it's a very different kind of race. You're never going to be in that like pit of despair where you still need to run for another 18 hours and it's pitch black. It's
man.
just it's going to be much more fun than that. And I think for a long portion of it, like the boys are going to be there. Like we might have the back of the van open, blasting music while you're just running there if you're on a road. So it'll be fun.
So from my understanding, we're not going to be directly behind the runner at all times.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Nice. I honestly, I still don't know. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I completely forgot it's going to be pitch black. We're going to be on the country roads. I don't know if I'm going to wear AirPods. I might not. I might try to experience just the wildlife. 2 a.m., 10K. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm excited. It's going to be a good time. And it's just one of those, like, never ever going to do it again. And like, actually, that's not true. I might actually.
This might be the start of something new.
It might be the start of something new. You never know. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I look forward to all of the things that you accomplish in your running career. I know there's a lot more to come, many PBs, and I think we'll have some head-to-head races because it's nice to see just another boy kind of at those, good performance numbers. And it's, I think, raising the bar for everybody else, just seeing what you're doing. So thank you for coming on to the podcast today, sharing your approach to running and training and keeping the sport fun for everybody in the community as well.
Yeah, no, awesome. I appreciate you guys for having me. Obviously, you all are the vets here, and you're all not just running, but the full trifecta of things as well. So you guys are obviously killing it as well, but appreciate you guys for having me on. It's been a whirlwind of a 2026, but, it's not over yet, and we'll see what kind of happens from here on out.
Awesome. Yeah, can't wait to see the race in a couple of weeks and the fall race. I think there's some big things, and you're locked in, so love to see it. And if you're listening and you know a friend that is either about to fall off or needs a kick in the butt to lock in, share this episode with them, send them Boys in Motion on Instagram, because Janson is the person you got to listen to for that.
But don't fall off.
Frig, this gave me again another kick in the butt. I think you guys are giving me every time we talk, it's another, hey, this is a kick in the butt to start training again, but I like it. And as always, just a reminder, we're of course not coaches, just a bunch of boys just trying to have fun and talking about the things we like to do.
Perfect. So keep showing up, keep moving, never fall off, and we'll see you on the next one.